Hi, my name's Lorna and I'm here to talk to you about postgraduate recruitment. So there's some interesting numbers when it comes to postgraduate recruitment and potentially some that you don't know about. So firstly, anecdotally from lots of the universities I work with, everyone feels that domestic recruitment feels in decline. And actually, when you look at the year of 2017 to 2018 versus quite a few years before, we're actually in growth by about 10%, which is fantastic. So domestically, the year of 2013 to 14, we had about 302,000 students studying at postgraduate taught level, and that's now 334,000. Fantastic growth. The numbers have just been released for last year, 2018 to 19, and again, there's growth on that as well, and we're kind of closer to 340,000. Really, really fantastic numbers. We should really take heart and feel confident in our ability to recruit really fantastic postgraduate taught students. That doesn't mean to say that we can't do more, and there are certainly areas that need some focus. So firstly, there's a really big gender gap, which is not surprising at undergraduate level. We really know that, but that gap widens in a really big way when we get to postgraduate taught level. So at postgraduate taught level, there's 275,000, or just over 275,000 female students studying a master's. And the number for men is 178,000. It's a vast difference. And we're not really sure what's going on there, because once you get to PhD level, the trend swings the other way and there are more men studying at PhD level. Could this be something to do with different types of role models, or is it about the focus for men and the need to earn? Perhaps there are men that are chasing kind of higher salaries, and for women it's much more important to invest in a master's where they can feel more confident in their abilities and skills and perhaps help them step up on the career ladder. The other numbers that are kind of really worth focusing on are things like teaching figures. So this is one area that we are in decline. So if we look back to 2013-14, there were 25,000 students on a PGCE. And over many years, there's been really bad press about being a teacher, and the pay gap has increased enormously. So now, looking at 2017 to 18, there's only 21,440 students studying a PGCE at different levels. This is despite vast investment by the government to get more and more people to study a PGCE, and also individual investment from all the universities offering this course as well. This is also a real shame, and of course, across things like PGCEs and also nursing, there's a real big disparity between men and women taking these courses up. So there's a really big difference in the numbers of people taking PGCEs this year versus many years ago. And of course, there's loads of factors playing a part there. As universities, we just need to do some work and research into why the students that are choosing you and choosing your PGCE to do it with you have chosen you. What are their motivations? Are they motivated by money? Is the government bursary the main reason they're doing it? Is it because it suits their family life better? And perhaps we can work also on career changes, taking people out of other careers and bringing them back into teaching. There's lots of opportunities. Now, you may not think about the student room when you're thinking about postgraduate study, but in fact we have one of the largest postgraduate audiences in the UK. As part of that, we have, of course, lots of different forums, and the main forum for postgraduate applicants is unsurprisingly called the Postgraduate Applications Forum. On that forum, we have more than 3 million page views a year, and that works out as around 83,000 individual users every single month. It's a lot of people thinking about doing a master's and beyond. What that means is we're really well placed to know postgraduate students and to influence them in their journey and their decision making. And it also means we understand their cycle. So thinking about the overall year for postgraduate students and what they're doing at each point, it's a really steady journey for most postgraduate students until we get to about January, and that's when we see big peaks. So we think that that's driven in part by new year, new me, and often that's mature students coming back into the cycle. But of course also lots of graduate recruiters are releasing their offers, and of course students at this point are considering, what am I going to do next year? So the really big peak is normally in March. Of course there are some deadlines in March as well, but this is the time that you really want to get in front of these students. This is when you should have your open days, webinars, and consider pushing out lots of content about funding to make it feel really real for these students and make sure that they can do it. Here at the Student Room, we run a survey called Options, and this has been something we do yearly. If we look back to 2018, there were some really interesting insights out of the study. So initially, one of the questions we've asked students is, what they're likely to do as soon as they finish university. Now, 26% of respondents say they want to go on to postgraduate study. It's fantastic to hear that so many people enjoy university so much that they want to continue their studies. However, 25% say they just don't know. What we want to do is persuade the unpersuadable. Those people that have not yet decided, we want to support them in their journey, ideally to kind of do some more postgraduate study. In addition to those that don't know what they're doing, we also asked whether students would consider postgraduate study at any time of their life. What's really interesting is that 66% of respondents said that they would consider postgraduate study at some point, which is really interesting. Another thing to consider is that 40% of our respondents said they would want to stay at their current university to continue their studies or come back to their studies. Now, I don't know many universities that have 40% of their postgraduate cohort that have come from their own university. So have a think about what you can do to persuade and influence your current cohort to stay on or return. One of the great things that many universities provide past cohorts and their alumni are great discounts to stay on for postgraduate study or return for a master's. That's really worth considering. Not only will you save a lot on marketing spend, but also you're making your students feel really valued and part of a big club, which is fantastic. Of course, also, you really believe in the education and the teaching offered at your university, so why would you not want to encourage your students to return? It's great to know that 26% of students want to continue into postgraduate study straight away. But one of the big barriers, it seems, is lack of information about postgraduate study. We asked students how informed they felt about their options for postgraduate study, and more than 50% did not feel informed. In fact, 15% did not feel informed at all. Now, this is something that we can really rectify. You can do this yourself, or we can do this together. There's so much information out there about postgraduate study, and of course, unlike undergraduate where there's a clear journey through UCAS, it is a bit more complicated at master's level, but there's lots of consistency across lots of universities, and this is something we can do together to help inform postgraduate students and make sure that they have all the answers they need to apply. So we know that lack of information is going to be a big barrier for students, but the biggest barrier are the problems with funding. Now, just to put this in perspective, most postgraduate courses, most master's courses are more than £10,000, and yet the primary source of funding is the government-backed postgraduate loan, which is only £10,400 and something pounds. The loan is meant to cover both fees and living expenses, and lots of master's courses are very intensive, so I just feel really unsure where these students are expecting to, or where we are expecting students to find the funds to continue studying. Interestingly, going back a few years when funding changed, lots and lots of students stopped doing their master's courses part-time, and many were actually withdrawn at part-time level, which is a real mistake. I've certainly noticed more part-time options coming back, and there has been an uptick in people taking up part-time options. That is one really fantastic way of studying for a master's, and that's what I did. I worked full-time while I did my master's, and it was kind of like an expensive hobby. But we really need to acknowledge the funding gap. Acknowledge it both in terms of providing information, but also empathising with students and providing solutions that are not necessarily about just getting a loan or finding a scholarship, because for some people it's just not an option. One really realistic option is saving, and that's okay, and sometimes that's a really good thing to tell people, and certainly we see students talking about that on the site. Another way to help students to think about funding in a different way is to talk to your current postgraduate cohort. Where did they get their funding? Every student is going to have a different story. Now, some may have a lot of help from their parents, some may have saved, some may have got a range of different scholarships, so they've gone out to different charities. Students are so resourceful, but more people can learn from their way of doing things. So go and talk to your students and do a bespoke series of case studies. And if you want to find a bigger audience for them, come and talk to me. Okay, so there's 4 things to remember and 4 things you can put into action really quickly. So firstly, do a big deep dive on your data. The more you understand about your cohort and the numbers available to you, the better your campaigns will be. You can use this to inform imagery and messaging, and you can supercharge your campaigns by doing this. Secondly, timing. It's all well and good if you've got great imagery and great messaging, but if it's at the wrong time, it's going to fall flat. So we can see from the student room that the key times are between January and April, with a big peak in March. You need to make sure you're in front of students at that point during the time they are researching and making their decisions. You also need to really acknowledge the funding gap. Provide support, help and advice for students and make it feel real for them. And finally, talk to students. Talking to students on your own campus, but also talk to students on the student room, take webinars, have open days, provide students the opportunity to talk to you too. And that's how you'll convert students to your master's courses.